Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences from some of the greatest coaches in the world. I'm Michael Kurkowski, so grateful for you joining me today. And if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to support the show. All right, let's dive in. Here we go. What's happening, people? Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast. Thank you for joining me on a very special milestone episode. This is number 250 of the Strength Connection podcast. So what I wanted to do today is share some lessons and some powerful insights that I've got from the podcast, particularly in the last 6 months or so. But for all of you who have listened from the beginning and those who found it along the way down the line, thank you so much for listening. This has been a true labor of love for me. So I always like to, reflect on jumping in and starting a podcast like this and now getting into 250 episodes. I always just found such fascination in conversation and of connecting with people who are experts, but just have really interesting insights and experiences in their lives, particularly in the manner of strength. So when I started the first podcast and Breakthrough Secrets, and immediately I just fell in love with chatting with people. I found I learned more from connecting and just having conversations than things like reading or studying. I've gained so much from this time. It's truly been a labor of love. And again, I appreciate you jumping on. So without further ado, I wanted to dive into 5 specific lessons that I pulled out here. This is in no specific order, but I wanted to talk about these because they were first very powerful when I first heard them on the podcast, but also ones that I've applied more into my life and ones that have made a huge impact, but also things that I'm still figuring out and still trying to work through. But I know it is a great lesson and something to aspire to work more on in there. I think, in all manners of strength, we're always trying to aim up. We're never finished. We're never a finished product, always trying to develop more. So that's what I've taken with these. So let's dive right in. So first lesson is, I call it power is in the pause. So there's no particular episode that comes to mind when I've heard from this, but in going over a lot of different conversations that I've had, an overarching theme in the biggest impacts that I felt in doing the podcast is those that don't force words just for the sake of speaking. So I found when you're economical with your words, it makes them more powerful. And the more you add in, the more opportunity there is for fluff and for bullshit. And this is personally something that I found from some of the greatest speakers that I've talked to and some of the most fluent conversations that I've had. It's with people who they're not afraid to stay silent for a moment. They sit back and they really think about what they want to say and then make it very economical in the words. And the more they do that, the more it hits. It's very dense in the lesson. And in thinking about this, a personal story that came to my mind, this was a long time ago when I was first in my career as a personal trainer. And there was a gentleman who was a co-owner of my facility named Dr. Hank Lynette. Now, Hank was a hypnotherapist by trade. He was a Renaissance man in a lot of different areas of fitness. But what's most interesting was he was in his 90s when I first started. And I knew this was a gentleman that came in. He once in a while would still take clients, would chat with people, but he didn't have a specific schedule anymore. And when I worked at this place and I was the manager of it, we would have weekly meetings, and every week we would go in and speak about the things that we're working on, sometimes bring in inspiration or motivation. And I was a couple of years into working, and I went into a meeting, met with the staff, and Hank was sitting there. It was the first time I ever saw him come to a meeting. And he sat for a moment. I was like, okay, we just went about our business. And just a few minutes in, he just got up and he started speaking. And the words that he said were so short, they were so impactful about what it is to be a professional in service, what it is to help people. And he's talked about his experience of going through life and the biggest lessons that he had. And he probably didn't speak for more than 7 or 8 minutes. But I remember all of us, there was 12 or 13 of us sitting around a table and nobody said a word. Everybody, it was so quiet. And we were just ingesting everything that he said. And it was the first time that I heard him speak more than a sentence or two at a time. He was very stoic. He always would sit in stillness a lot when he was in the gym. So for him to first sit and speak here for more than a couple sentences, it was like seeing Moses get up on top of the mountain and start speaking to you. It was so powerful. And I don't know why that hit me so much in how powerful it is that you don't need to just speak for speaking's sake. Make your words as dense and as strong as possible, and then you don't need to say that much. And this is something that I'm working on a lot. This is something I've tried to continuously develop in my own life with interviewing, with connecting with people, is to let the conversation flow and don't be afraid to sit back and be silent for a moment. And often I found myself filling up the dead air if there is a moment with just more noise, and then you just get down in tangents and you start saying things and you can't connect it together, and that's often when you don't know how to get back. So I've really made it an effort to be as economical with my words as I can. And I found this is also just an overall philosophy for life. When we can face endless noise all day in everything that we do. We're constantly bombarded with more information. But when often the most profound things and the things are most valuable are very simple. They're very short. And if you don't take time to pause, it's hard to find that real wisdom. So that's one of the first and one of the most biggest lessons that I've learned from interviewing that I've taken not only in the podcast, but also in other aspects of my life is power is in that pause. All right, moving on. Lesson number two is fitness is a phenomenal gateway drug for personal development. So Chase Tollison said this on the podcast a short while ago. Chase is a great coach, and it started me in a conversation about what comes first, a strong body or a strong mind. And this was a question I put out to different communities that I run and just different people that I was just interested in asking about what comes first. And while mindset matters and it's important to have a strong mind, if you aren't training your body, focusing on the physical will make the biggest impact on your mentality at that moment. Okay. So when I thought about this question, I said, what does it mean to have a strong mind? And just like asking what the definition of strength is, this could be subjective in anybody that you different ask. Everybody has a different slight definition of it. But if I thought there's two fundamental things that we could all agree with of what makes a strong mindset, and that's one that is confident and one that's optimistic. So what I found is when you train your body and you make progress in your strength or your body composition or your energy, all the things that we know comes from developing a good exercise and workout routine, that naturally builds your confidence. It will show you that you're disciplined, you're capable of making a positive change. You stuck to something, so you've built up a strong work ethic and you've seen the fruits of your labor. And innately, you can start to think, damn, what else can I do? I've done this and I've seen progress on this. You can start to see other things in an optimistic perspective much more. So I said, there's nothing bad about working on your mindset and developing that. But if I was going to choose one versus the other, if you don't work on the physical side first, is naturally going to flow downstream into the mental. And what was interesting is some people who would come back and say, no, absolutely, you need to have a strong mindset first. Like mindset is number one overall. I was like, okay, let me see if there's some truth to that. But often we can get into mindset practices so much that we don't actually take action on it. Where if you focus on your physical, you have to take action towards that. So you're putting action into place. So that's when Chase said this. I thought this was such a powerful thing is work on the body first. That's naturally going to build a strong mind. And eventually you're going to get to a point where maybe you need to work on the mind even more. But if you have to choose one versus the other to start with a strong body. All right, lesson number three. It's freeing to admit we're all actually amateurs. This came from Jonathan Goodman. Now, John came on at the beginning of this year to do a two-part podcast, and I followed Jonathan for a long time from the work he's done with the Personal Trainer Development Center and all his books. And he came on to talk about 20 different things that he was putting into a new book. And this was the first one that he put out. And we had a really good discussion about this. And what I came out of from this is it's a hard trap we all fall in with comparison. There's so much noise around us all the time. You can jump on social media and see all these people that look like they're doing better than you and they figured it out. Okay, there's an opportunity everywhere to stack yourself up against other people and their highlight reels of their life. But in reality, no one has this thing figured out. Everyone is trying to work out what it is that they're trying to do. Okay, so that was an important lesson because it's very easy to get into space where you see the best of the best people. You see somebody that has a better body than you, or they make more money than you, or they have a better family life than you, or they seem like they have all these things worked out. When if you actually sit down and talk to these people, they're just trying to figure out life just like everybody else is. Maybe they're dealing with different problems that you have, but there's no such thing as an arrival. You never get to the end part of where you're supposed to be. Time keeps moving on until eventually we move on to the next, phase of life. But that was really powerful me is realizing that the ones that don't have it all figured out and they recognize this, they can focus on just getting to work on being a little bit better. So the best way I found to overcome this feeling of comparison is actually sitting down and finding out what it is that you really want. Define your own definition of success. Then actively work on being that person every day. And I found that often I've talked to people who they don't exactly know what it is they want. They have an idea of things that they'd like to achieve, but actually saying, who do you want to be and what it is that you truly want? That's another layer deeper. It's not something that's usually right on the surface unless you've done this work. And I found the best way to avoid that comparison trap and try and say, no, I want this because I saw this person do it or XYZ is find out actually your own definition of success. And when you do that, then you can just work on every day, comparing yourself to who you were the day before rather than who someone else is today. All right, moving on. Lesson number 4, there's a difference between making a change and making a transformation. Okay, so this stemmed at the end of 2023 for me when asking about this differentiation. And there's a million programs out there specifically in fitness that use the word transformation, 6-week transformation, 90-day transformation. Now, I remember a long time ago when Dax Moy came on the podcast, Dax talked about this, and he was the first one I remember bringing this up. And he says, I'm seeing a 6-week program where they have a before and after picture, and they're saying, look how they transform their body. And he said, that's not a transformation program. That's a change program. And the reason it's so big is because it's very easy to make a change, but there's a reason why 95% of people who make that change fall back into old habits and they don't succeed long term in their health and fitness. So the problem with this is the word change doesn't sell because nobody wants to change. But if you say the word transform, that's a very powerful word. So it's used a lot in marketing programs and products. So this led me down the path after talking to Dax of asking a bunch of people their thoughts on this question. What is the difference between a change and a transformation? I got some really cool insights from people. The one that stuck out was when Jenny and Eric Patton came on the podcast from their program, Inspire Change Collective. And I asked them, what do you think the difference is between making a change and transformation? And Jenny jumped on the mic and laid it out. She said, transformation means you can't go back to where you were. And she used the example of like a butterfly. It's like a caterpillar becomes a butterfly no matter what the butterfly wants and how much he wants to go back to being a caterpillar, they can't. They are now a butterfly. They've transformed. And I thought that was the best analogy that I can use when talking to people about making a transformation in their lives. And that's why it takes time to not just make a change, but when you transform, it means that all the old habits, all the things that were holding you back before, there's not even a chance anymore that you go back to that. Okay. It's part of your past, it's part of who you were, but it's not a part of your identity anymore. It's completely shifted over. And in order to do that, you need to go through different seasons of life. You need to go through times when things are going really well, and then times when things aren't going really well, and you still make some strides and still make progress going forward. And then eventually you get to a point where there's not even a chance that you can go back anymore. So I remember when Jenny said that and just put me back in my seat. I said, that's the best definition that I've heard. And shout out to Jenny for bringing that out. All right, and the last one I wanted to bring up is lesson number 5. Being brutally honest is better than dancing around the truth. So this lesson came when Aram Gregorian came on the podcast, and this wasn't too long ago when he came on. And I really enjoyed talking to Aram because the work that he does specifically in nutrition, specifically working with women as well, is after talking to him, he's a brutally honest person. He does not dance around the truth with people, and often he'll call out people when they are not doing what we need to, or they're making excuses, all this. And often most of us are very conflict averse. We don't like to go into that and face those things. But the reality is you can't overcome challenges until you face it and face it head on. And so many people, we dance around the struggles that we have because it hurts. It's painful. And no one wants to feel that pain. So often we make excuses or we rationalize or say, well, things aren't really that bad. Or, oh, yeah, I aim to do this. And, I aim to do 5 days a week, here, but I only got 3, but it's still okay. It's still not bad. And we fall into this like middle zone, this mediocre based life where, yeah, there's a little progress being made, but it's really not going full force. When one of the best things that you can do at that point is be brutally honest with yourself and being like, no, this is a problem. You've got an issue. And like actually put it just head on into you. Often a quick just flash in the eyes right there will do a lot more to being truthful and being real than dancing around the truth over and over again. And I found I did this for a long time in my coaching career is I was afraid to confront people when they weren't doing things. Be like, all right, well, let's make a good effort this week. Let's go into this. When honestly, if I go back to that, it'd be like a better thing to do is just being like, you're not doing what you needed to do. Why not? And just being straightforward with it. And then doing that same thing working with myself. If I've gotten to places where I said I'm going to do this, and then you do it a little bit, make a little bit of progress, but not exactly what you said you're going to do. And it's would be much better looking back in hindsight if I just said, like actually confronted it just straight up. So that's what I got so much from Aram, and that is just being brutally honest with yourself is way better than just dancing around the truth. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Yeah, onwards and upwards. It's been an absolute just pleasure to do this podcast. 250 episodes. That's freaking crazy. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. And on to the next 250. Again, I appreciate it. Much love to you. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, peace. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait. Go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.